You're listening to the Cinemental Podcast.
Shall we begin?
All right, welcome back to the Cinemental Podcast, where we discuss mental health themes from cinema, television, and popular culture. I'm Jeffrey Jones, and I'm a filmmaker and a professor, and I'm joined, as always, by my brother, Dr. Joshua Jones, who, as well as just being a super doctor, is a general and forensic psychiatrist.
Great to see you, Jeff. I'm so excited to talk about Superman. I love this character.
Yeah,
I liked this movie.
Everything leading up, I was like, okay, Superman's going to be great. But then this started getting the good reviews. So I was like, all right, let's see it. Let's test this thing. Let's see how it goes. Okay, we want you to start your week off right with our podcast. So we drop a new episode every Monday and Thursday mornings at 9 a.m. Eastern. Yes, Thursday is late in the week, so you're not starting off your week with it. But we do it Monday and we do it Thursday. You can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts, or you can watch our hottest and spiciest clips and now full episodes on the YouTubes. Okay, Josh, we are talking about Superman, and we're going to cover, obviously, the movie. But part of cover the movie means we're just going to talk about Superman in general, the idea of Superman, the mythos that is Superman. So if you haven't seen the new movie, one, go see it. It's really good. But two, there's going to be something here for you, because we're going to talk about kind of soup in general a little bit. But Josh, tell us some of the other topics we're going to cover today.
Yeah, we're going to talk a lot about this movie. Jeff and I really want to kind of dissect it and talk about the Superman mythos. We're going to talk about why we think this movie works, and I've got some provocative ideas to run by you from a filmmaking perspective, Jeff. We're also going to talk about a lot of the really big emotions that got talked about in this movie, which I think was really interesting, both from Superman's perspective, but also from Lex Luthor's perspective. And Jeff will answer the question, are emotions good or bad? And then on Thursday, we're going to tackle the question that's on everybody's minds, which is Superman woke?
Yeah, baby. Let's do it. I'm so excited for that. It's kind of all I want to talk about, but we're going to talk about it because we got to cover the movie first. But I just had feelings when it came out that people were upset that Superman was too woke. So tune into that on Thursday, but a lot to cover today. Okay, so Josh, this was an interesting one for me. So for those who haven't seen it, I'm going to give some spoilers here. Essentially, we're catching up on Superman when he's already established. So this is not a origin story film, which I thought was great. I thought that was a breath of fresh air. He's already deep into a relationship with Lois, but he's gotten involved with an international conflict, and he's done it just to save lives, but he's gotten himself in a pickle because of that. So enter Lex Luthor. Lex wants half of this country for his own evil deeds, but he really, spends the whole movie trying to kill Soup, as he usually does. Josh, what were your thoughts on this film? Give me just a quick down and dirty thumbs up, thumbs down. Roger Ebert this one for me.
I give it 1.5 thumbs up. Look, okay. I think viewers and listeners of our podcast have picked up by now that I'm pretty big into superheroes. I've loved the Superman movies. I was excited each time a new iteration came out, and I thought the setup for this movie was really interesting because they set up at the very beginning that metahumans, this new James Gunn DCU universe's name for superheroes or supervillains, have been around for about 300 years. So the world's used to dealing with them by now. Right. But this guy, Superman, has been around not that long, only about 3 years, which is pretty short. And then they jump right into
3 years active, right?
I mean, he's been on Earth.
So
So they allude to, he had the typical Clark Kent upbringing by Ma and Pa and Smallville, and like you said, they don't give us a lot of glimpses of that, but generally allude to the fact that he had the prototypical Superman mythos upbringing,
Right.
et cetera, et cetera. But now he's already Clark Kent. He's a fairly well-established reporter. He has just started a relationship with Lois Lane, and they're kind of working through some of that. And a really great scene where he and Lois, who knows that Clark Kent is Superman, are in her apartment, and she is provocatively interviewing him as Lois Lane interviewing Superman after he just waded into this international conflict. Yeah. And that scene, I think, is one of the best in all of the Superman movies, because it's a relatively naive Superman trying to figure out and trying to defend what he thinks is a very obvious thing. He should just wade into this international conflict, and Lois Lane pointing out all the nuances about being on the international stage and being Superman in the era of nation states that he hasn't thought of. It was great, and I could watch that scene over and over and over again.
Yeah, and because it's not just Superman's scene, like it's also Lois's scene, and Lois is no wallflower. Lois is always a bit of a badass, but like she was a human badass in this. She wasn't a prop. Like, this was a real Lois Lane that I would like want to follow a solo movie, of this Lois. Like, Lois kicked ass. She didn't pull punches with Clark or Superman. She was a reporter. She was a reporter first, and asked some really tough questions that you would want to ask of, a metahuman. So like, I loved that scene because it was, it showed a new side of Superman, but also I felt like a new side of Lois.
Yeah, really. Yeah, excellent point. I mean, Lois Lane, of course, played by Rachel Brosnahan. I mean, she brought it. Their chemistry was palpable. You have to have good chemistry between Superman / Clark Kent and Lois Lane in any of these movies and shows, and they certainly had it. So that was believable to me.
I want to have a little bit of a broad discussion about Superman, because I didn't love this movie as much as I wanted to, because it lacked too much story for me. There was like the plotting I didn't love. There were some things that just didn't make sense in terms of the plotting. But ultimately, this is a guy who just didn't make a choice the entire movie. The only choice that Superman makes is to turn himself in. And he turns himself in a way that, like, Lex Luthor just could have killed him. And if 4 or 5 different times, Lex could have killed him. And he says at the end his only motivation was to be able to kill Superman. Well, no, it wasn't, because you could have killed him like 4 or 5 times. But he was really passive in this movie, in terms of, like, decision-making, et cetera, et cetera. And you and I have talked about this, and you made the point that you kind of have to, like, nerf Superman in order to make a good Superman movie. Talk to me more about that, because I think in that lies the like beauty, but also like the difficulty in making a good Superman movie.
Yeah, Superman's a god. He's invulnerable. He can fly. He can shoot lasers out of his eyes. He's a god. Superman has to react to things to make him tolerable, to make him human. Because if he's too proactive, and DC Comics has played this out. If Superman is too proactive, in a lot of other, multiverse, alternate takes on Superman, he invariably becomes a tyrant. What's really interesting is this movie toyed with that a little bit, right? That's what Lois was really challenging him on about his intervention between these two warring countries, which I thought was really neat. And, kind of her being the conscience of Superman, and hey, with, to borrow a Spider-Man line, with great power comes great responsibility.
Sure.
Probably turned the tide here. Really one of the worst Superman movies from the original Christopher Reeves run, Superman 4, Quest for Peace, he rounded up all the nuclear weapons and threw them into the sun. Basically, becoming a tyrant of the earth. And lots of other times he does that too. So in order to have Superman be mortal, to not be a god, you basically have to have him just reacting to stuff that's thrown his way.
Right.
And I think that's okay, because in a lot of ways, he kind of gets it, and I think that this iteration was kind of getting it, that he needed to be reactive to what humans did. Otherwise, he was just going to become, what in this movie, what his Kryptonian parents wanted them to be, which is a tyrant.
Yeah, and look, I totally get that, and it's funny. I was sitting with, two of my friends who were showrunners of a very successful show. I went and saw this movie with them, and they loved it, and they thought it was great. And I was like, just really from a storytelling standpoint, and they were like, dude, tonally, this was right on.
Tonally, it was right on. I agree.
Tonally, and it was, but I'm just bothered by the lack of agency of a hero. You look at any movie, not just Marvel movies or DC movies, like all Marvel, DC, anything. You have a power that's stronger than your hero because they have to rise and they have to figure something out. It's just not as interesting to me if he's, the most powerful. And you used the term before we talked today that you felt like they kind of nerfed Superman a little bit. They start out with him, having been like almost mortally wounded. And it turns out, big spoiler, turns out that the guy that beat him up, Ultraman, was a clone of Superman. So sure, Superman can beat up Superman. I get that. But you start the movie with him almost on death's door. Yeah, he's after the kryptonite poisoning, he's going to take days to recover. You still have the classic DC thing where like Superman's just throwing a bunch of punches, which to me just makes for really lame action. But I don't know. This was I don't think I'd ever watch this movie again. And that's one of the things that I do think of when I think of, is this a good movie? But it was also really emotionally poignant, and I want to talk now a little bit about like his final. Well, go ahead and react to that.
Before we do that, I want to tell you my theory as to why I think this movie worked and why it's more like a Marvel movie than a DC movie.
Because people have been conditioned to not care about story anymore.
No. Well, okay, cynic. I mean, first of all, it was James Gunn. But I will posit to you, and we talked about this.
Movie, there's no doubt.
We talked about this when we talked about when we talked about Thunderbolts. Is that one of the reasons why Marvel has been more successful, in my opinion, than DC in making movies? Is that Marvel takes normal people, gives them extraordinary powers, and sees what happens. Right. DC takes gods and tries to make them human.
Right.
This movie, Jeff, wasn't about Superman. This movie was more about the mortal people around Superman, Lois Lane and the Daily Planet team, and how they react to extraordinary circumstances. The extraordinary circumstance here being that they're in pretty close proximity to the title character, the most powerful man in the universe.
Right.
That is what made this movie.
Look, I agree, and in many ways, like this was a Lex Luthor, Lois Lane, and Mr. Terrific movie.
Oh, Mr. Terrific was, dare I say, terrific.
He stole the show, and he was the one who had like the biggest change and the most agency. Like he's presented, and he's like, you know what? Yeah, I'm gonna go help save this guy. And then did really cool stuff that I did not know he could do. And was just awesome. I thought Mr. Terrific was the best. He was the best part of this movie for me. And so now why it resonated with audiences. I do think that this movie was more than just an action film. This movie had something to say. And the sweet moments of vulnerability. When I saw it in the theater, those were the moments that people really enjoyed, and I thought that was great. And so at least there was some emotion and some heart, behind this one that I think was missing from the Cavill ones.
Right.
The Cavill. There was a lot of shots of him just in like the Jesus pose, in his movies, but not a lot of heart.
I'm going to talk a lot more about the Cavill Superman when we talk about whether Superman is woke or not.
Great.
So I
love that.
I'm going to reserve that for that.
Yeah. One super positive note for me though: Corn Sweat, done, sold. I did not want to see Cavill get replaced. Corn Sweat is legit, man. I hope he has a massive career ahead of him. Hope he plays Superman for years. Hope to see him in other things. You know, one of my favorite moments was them talking about things that are punk rock. And he's like, I think being, you know, kind of nerdy, I think that's punk rock. And it's like, yeah, man, like that's the Superman I want. He's not cool, you know. I don't want Superman to be cool. He grew up in Kansas, you know, like I was all about that. And for as sexy as that human being is, he sold this idea that he was like some nerdy, uncool guy really well. Because that is a sexy man. All right, let's talk about my favorite part of the film, Josh, which is the ending. And you know, obviously, we're going to talk about whether this is a woke film later, but I just love this. So this is Superman's final speech. Lex calls him alien, and he says, "That's where you've always been wrong about me, Lex. I'm as human as anyone. I get scared. I wake up every morning, and despite not knowing what to do, I put one foot in front of the other, and I try to make the best choices I can. I screw up all the time. That is being human. I don't like this part. That's my greatest strength, and I hope that one day, for the sake of the world, you'll realize it's yours too." I didn't love that part. But the message is so clear, and it is what the movie's about. The whole movie is about how he's imperfect and he's doing the best he can, and that's the human experience. And I just thought that was a lovely, lovely message. And I think it's really good and healthy from a mental health standpoint, too.
Yeah, I completely agree. When Superman is at his greatest, as he was in this movie, I think, it is when he is humble.
Right.
He is just, in a lot of the earlier movies with Christopher Reeve, the Lois Lane of that era called him, "Oh, you're just a big Boy Scout." I mean, that it doesn't really resonate with people today as much, but he's just trying to do good. Right. And the doing good of the Supermans that I think that we have really fallen in love with is pretty simple. You save people. You save people from getting hurt. You don't necessarily worry about saving them from themselves so much, but you're just trying to save people from getting hurt.
Right.
It is as basic as that. And you mess up, and you are human. I have found, as I have gotten older, that being humble really is kind of our own superpower, especially if you're when you're in a leadership role, when you're being a parent.
You're so I love the idea of like, I'm the most humble person in the world. It's just always been my favorite. And I'm not saying that about you. I just, in general, I just love playing with that trope. I often write characters who are like, I'm so humble. I'm just ridiculously humble.
Look, of all of my characteristics, I am most proud of my humility.
There you go.
No, but it really is, because if you show I am willing to learn, I'm always willing to learn. I'm always willing to be open to new possibilities. I'm always willing to admit that I might be wrong. I might not be, but I might be wrong. Yeah. And I think that's really what's missing from our discourse in our culture today.
Yeah, I was going to use the word discourse,
about
exactly.
Each other.
Yeah, like it's you have to be. Or the lie on social media is that you have to be perfect and that you have to live the perfect life. And even when people like post like their imperfections, they're posting it perfectly. Like they framed their imperfections in such a in such a perfect way of like, oh, look at me, how imperfect I'm being right now. And it's like, no, that's not what it is. So yeah, I do think that this was to give credit to James Gunn. This was a message that needed to be said right now, and so it was a very timely theme, which I'm all about theme. That's my number one thing as a writer and as a professor. All I teach is theme. And so, this theme of being human means making mistakes and doing the best you can and putting one foot forward. That's an incredible theme. And it is what the movie is about. He kept making mistakes. He kept just doing his best. It just lacked too much agency for me to make this a great film.
The other thing about this franchise, and I think other franchises that make the movies more difficult to appreciate, is that some franchises are now on their third, fourth, fifth, sixth iterations.
Right.
And I think that makes it very difficult to appreciate them for what they are. Because I found myself in this movie going, oh, yeah, that's a pretty interesting take on it, but I liked the Cavill one better. Or, oh, yeah, that was better than the Reeve take. But you know what? Dean Cain's got kind of a little bit better smirk. That makes it difficult.
I agree.
To appreciate all these things for what they are, because you've got so much other, not canon, but you've got so many other takes on it to compare it against.
But I don't understand what they're doing with the Batman. Having Batman be. I mean, DC had two simultaneously Batmans.
Batman.
Between Robert Pattinson and Ben Affleck.
The Batsman.
Okay. That just bugs me. It just bugs me, man. I like the way that the MCU has done it, where they've just been a lot more sort of traditional with, they've kept the same characters, the same actors for a long time. Obviously they've had to reboot Fantastic Four 5 times because they haven't been able to get that right. But, for the most part, they've stayed consistent, and consistency is great. So yeah, you're right. It is hard to not compare this to previous Superman, especially when Henry Cavill was so loved. He did a great job as Superman, and I thought he was perfect until David Cornsweet came along, and wow, he knocked it out of the park. And what a tough job to have to take that from Cavill, who was so good.
Yeah, Cavill was fine. I've got
you didn't love Cavill.
I thought Cavill was. I'm going to talk more again. I'm going to talk more about it in our Superman Woke episode on Thursday.
Fair enough. I'll tell you what casting I did.
Henry Cavill's almost too. He's almost too pretty to be Superman.
He is too pretty to be Superman. I agree.
I mean, he is one handsome motherfucker. There is no doubt about it.
No, but this is the thing. It's in some ways Superman is perfect, so let's find the perfect man to play. But I think that's a mistake. Cornsweet was much better. I also loved the casting of his parents. Because coming off of Kevin Costner being the dad, to now I can't remember that actor's name, but he's not Kevin Costner. He's not Kevin Costner.
He was not. He was
and
not.
The scene when he sits and talks to him on the bench was so heartfelt and so wonderful, and it's yeah, let's have the opposite of Superman be raising Superman. And, the moment at the end where he's like, oh, he likes to see his parents. And then he's now watching clips of his, Kansas parents instead of Bradley Cooper, was just an awesome way to end the movie.
Jeff, we should talk a little bit more about Lex, though, because that was an interesting take. And I don't know that I love it.
It's my job to do the transitions. But if I don't do it, you got to step in, and that's what happened here, and that's my apologies to our listening audience at home. Anytime Josh does the transitions, it means, Jeff, you're moving slow. Okay, so let's talk about good old Lex, because I thought that his arc here was really fascinating, and I loved that they mentioned his motivations so cleanly and clearly, which was envy. And I thought that was so interesting because we think of Lex Luthor as this bad guy. He's a bad guy.
And he is.
And he is. But it's also, that's a less interesting thing to talk about other than why someone is a bad guy. And his envy sort of drove him to madness. He probably would have been a bad guy. He probably would have been a bad guy if Superman had never existed. But I got to thinking about envy, and the question I want to ask you is a mental health question. Are negative emotions bad emotional tools to better yourself? Because I've certainly used them a lot in the past. I don't think you always end up like Lex Luthor. Where do negative emotions fit in the realm of self-betterment?
Emotions are neither good nor bad.
Okay.
Emotions are information. And so back to your question of, are negative emotions, or emotions that we perceive as negative, are they bad motivators for change? And the answer is no. They're actually great motivators for change. Emotions are information that your brain is giving you about the situation that you're finding yourself in. So it is really learning to read what your emotions are telling you about yourself, your internal and your external environment, so that you can decide what to do. Now, obviously, emotions are super powerful. They can be super overwhelming.
Right.
And we often have actions kind of jump on the back of the emotions before we can even think about it. That's a lot of what people work on in therapy, especially a particular type called cognitive behavioral therapy, about being able to identify the emotions and have some time to decide how you're going to act on those. But the straightforward answer to your question, which I know you love, is no. Negative emotions, or what you perceive as negative emotions, those aren't bad motivators.
I just don't buy that. I
you're
don't
wrong.
I don't buy the idea that like, oh, emotions are just information. No, some emotions
They are.
Some emotions, though, correct me if I'm wrong here, some emotions spark good feeling hormones or chemicals in your body, and some emotions push bad feeling chemicals in your body. Do
It's
you
the
get
other way around.
positive feelings from negative emotions? There's no way that's true.
No, you get the emotions from these chemicals.
If you're like, there are certain emotions like anger and envy that like eat at you. You can feel it eating at you. It raises your stress in an unhealthy way. And then there are the days where you woke up highly motivated. You feel like you can do anything. You got like, there's no way you can say that one of those isn't positive and one of those isn't negative.
I didn't say that.
Let me
Yes,
ask you a
okay,
different way,
I'm
though.
feeling really jealous. Why am I feeling really jealous? Do I want to feel like this? Let me think about it. Let me use some skills and insight into myself. What am I feeling jealous about? Oh, that's what I'm feeling jealous about. What do I want to do with that? Do I want to, I'm jealous of Francine because she got that last piece of cake. Do I want to cut her Achilles tendon so she falls down and I can take that last piece of cake? That would be a choice. I could do that, but no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to take the emotion and go, okay, I'm going to sublimate that and go, hey, good for you, Francine, for getting that last piece of cake.
But that's
and
not
move
what
on to
people
the next
do.
thing. That is exactly the thought process that people can have.
Can have.
Yes,
But that is the vast minority of people are processing their emotions that well.
Most people, you're right. A lot of people are just reacting on their emotions, but you don't.
So
have
you don't
to.
think it's bad? You don't think it's bad if someone is like, let's say, I don't know. It could be any job. Could be a chef, and they're just motivated by, like my dad always said that I was worthless, and every day I wake up and I try and prove that fucker wrong, and that's their sole driving force their entire life. You think that is just as okay as someone who wakes up being like, my parents always told me I could be anything, and I believed them, and they filled me with hope, and I wake up every morning bouncing out of bed, trying to prove them right, that I am just a delight. You don't think there's a difference between the two? You don't think that one is more mentally healthy than the other?
Of course there's a difference between the two, but I will point out that in your first case, that guy, he is making a choice to do something relatively healthy with that emotion.
Okay, all right, sure.
Yeah. Look, my point, Jeff, is
hold
we
on,
shouldn't be afraid of our emotions. Even if you have really big emotions and you don't know always what to do with them, you can learn what to do with them. You can think about what to do with them.
I just disagree. And I know that you're a doctor, so there's things that you know from a doctoral standpoint, but I think we should be afraid of our emotions.
Really?
Because 100%. Because if we act on a negative emotion, I think we're more likely to do something that's going to hurt somebody.
I don't agree. I think you have to act on those negative emotions. You don't have to act negatively. That's where the choice comes in. That's where identifying the emotion, why you're having the emotion, and what you want to do about it.
Do you think people
is
more
really
often
important.
make a good choice or a bad choice after a negative emotion?
I think they probably more often make a poor choice.
Okay,
but
and
they
do you
don't
think that people
have
make?
to.
I understand. Do you think that people make a good choice or a bad choice after a positive emotion?
I think that's more of a mixed bag.
Okay, and I disagree with you. I think that people are more likely to make and that's where I'm having a hard time squaring the circle for myself.
I think we're going to have to disagree on that, and that's fine. I just think I just don't think it's that simple, Jeff. And bringing it back to the movie here,
Right.
Lex's envy here drives him to, like you said, to madness, and he makes these increasingly weird swings at trying to take down the Man of Steel, which is which I think was pretty cool. I thought that they did some really neat things with that. But I think Superman's point is at the end that Lex doesn't have to take that envy and do bad with it. He can take that envy and do good with it if he thinks about it. If he thinks about what he really wants to be.
That's fair. And that's the ending line. That's my greatest strength. And I hope that one day, for the sake of the world, you realize it's yours too.
Right.
So, okay.
Right. Because what if he took all these obviously billions, trillions of dollars that he's taken to try to expose or destroy the Man of Steel and turned it to do good, or turned it to improve humanity? And I think that's the point. That's the point. And the other thing that we have to say is that Lex Luthor's motivation is not, and nor is it ever in the Superman comics or movies, really to kill Superman.
Right.
His envy, he wants to be Superman.
Right. Sure. That tracks. Okay, let me bring this home. Let me wrap this up in a way that I think you and I can both agree, okay? So I think what you're saying is, if you do feel a negative emotion, it's okay to use that negative emotion as motivation for a positive act.
Yeah.
For instance, self-betterment. For instance, for a drive.
Right.
Okay, I think we agree on that. I do think that my point would be, you gotta cap that at some point. You gotta work through that at some point. And I'll give you my reason for that, Josh. I was fired, maybe 10 years ago now from a job, and it just wrecked me. It absolutely wrecked me because it came out of nowhere. I was not expecting it, but I used that anger and that not hatred, but I used that anger to change everything I wanted to about my life. And in one day, I became the person who I wanted to be, and I was working hard, and I was highly motivated. And I also knew a couple days into it, this is not sustainable.
Sure.
I cannot use the adrenaline and the anger from getting fired for much more than a month. I need to turn this into a positive emotion.
Sure.
And that I think is why I think this is such an interesting debate. Is how long can you sustain a what I would call a negative emotion, and I think that's maybe where you and I disagree.
I'm a little lost in our am I agreeing with you, disagreeing with the agreement of the disagreement?
Okay, well, we're gonna agree to move on is what we're gonna do right now.
Look, I think the number one point that I want our listeners and our viewers to understand is if you have these negative emotions, or you think are negative emotions, don't beat yourself up about it. You really can't control the emotions that you feel. And if you feel really big emotions, you also don't have to be controlled by them. You can, and I would recommend that you try doing it through therapy. You can figure out how to use that emotion as information and then choose an action that you think will be positive for you. That's my point.
Yeah, that sounds like another doctor trying to push therapy on people. Josh Jones in the pockets of big therapy.
Big therapy.
All right, so Josh, great conversation. I love it, actually, when you and I get into it. I think that's a lot of fun. You had a couple more takes you wanted to talk about with Superman before we wrap up and kick it to Thursday. What did you want to talk about?
Love Nathan Fillion as the Guy Gardner Green Lantern. You told me that James Gunn has said that he's got two tenets that he sticks to in filmmaking.
Yeah, the tenet number one is, how do I make this a great movie? And then two, how do I embarrass Nathan Fillion? Those are the first two questions he asked himself. Nathan Fillion has been in every single James Gunn project. Every single one. Which I just think is awesome. That level of loyalty, that level of friendship, I think is is fantastic. So much of this was great. So much of it was great. It's almost a home run for me. It's a good triple. It's a good leggy triple.
Good leggy triple. Love it.
Yeah,
Love
had to beat the throw, but got in for a triple.
Got it under the tag. Okay.
Yeah, got it under the tag. All right, so I think that's it for me, Josh. All right, thanks as always for watching or listening to Cinemental and our coverage of Superman. If you like this episode, please subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. You can also watch clips of Cinemental on YouTube, where we'd love to hear what you would like us to cover next. And please tell us. I'm super curious what people would like to see. You can also watch my companion series, The One Thing, where I take a deeper dive into screenwriting, both available on the Large and in Charge channel on YouTube. I have not done well on the One Thing, but I did just film The Exorcist, so the Exorcist episode of that is coming up. Yeah. So follow Dr. Josh Jones, America's Psychiatrist, on Blue Sky. This has been a Large and in Charge production. For Josh Jones, I'm Jeff Jones, and we will see you next week. No, we'll see you on Thursday.
I want you to hit me as hard as you can.